Princess Knight Chapter 41, 52. Clang. Clang. The sound of swords meeting with each other sounded in Astria's mansion courtyard. Cling. One of the swords was broken. The tip of the sword danced in the sky before it embedded on the ground behind the red-haired man. The two knights that were exchanging blows with their swords smiled at each other. It's my loss. You are really good, milady. Reinhard looked at the iron sword in his hand that was cut right in the middle before looking at the girl who wore a similar knight uniform in front of him. No, Sir Reinhard. It was because you already defeated me a few times with the same sword. That was why I was able to cut the worn-out sword in your hand. The girl, Artoria, wiped the sweat that formed in her forehead with her hand. She looked refreshed after moving her body in the spar. I can't take that reason, milady. It's my loss. The weapon is not the problem here, you have improved in your swordplay, and you managed to beat me right now. Reinhard turned around and pulled the tip on the severed sword before approaching Artoria. Please take a look, the sword was cut in two beautifully. It's the sign that your swordplay had improved tremendously. He gave Artoria a refreshing smile. Artoria looked at Reinhard with a happy smile on her face. Is that so? She exclaimed happily. Yes, milady. I believe that there are only a few people in this world who can beat you in pure swordsmanship. It's been a few days since the party. Artoria had gotten used to her new memories and she had sparred with Reinhard every day in the morning. Merlin was running around the slum and the city on Artoria's order. She had ordered him to look at Felt and Rom. At the same time, she wanted Merlin to protect them and searching a candidate to be trained as a knight. She wanted to make the Round Table Knight in this world. She wanted to honor her memories and her identity as Artoria Pendragon by creating another round table in this world. You are exaggerating, Sir Reinhard. In this mansion alone, I know two people that can defeat me in pure swordsmanship. One of them is you, and the other one is Merlin. Merlin was the one who taught Artoria about everything she know. Even Artoria's, my swordsmanship was not the best compared to the other round table knights. Reinhard had a surprised expression when Artoria said that. Merlin's swordsmanship is better than yours, milady? Isn't he a magician? Yes, he is. Remember when Sage Council asked Merlin in the party about his identity? Reinhard nodded his head at Artoria. Yes. I believe he said that he was your tutor or something. Indeed. He's my tutor. He taught everything to me, which included swordsmanship. That's why, in pure swordsmanship, he's still better than me. That's surprising. Almost every magician in this country focused on their magic. If someone pursued sword and magic at the same time, they will not be special in either. For example, Julius. He's proficient in spirit magic, but his swordsmanship is better than his magic. Compared to the true spirit magician, his magic is not that strong. Artoria smiled wryly and looked away. Merlin is Merlin, I can only say that. Ha ha ha, I see. Then, milady. Allow me to excuse myself. I have a patrol this afternoon, so I need to go to the night station right now. Artoria looked at Reinhard and nodded her head. Alright. I also plan to visit the slum again to meet Felt and Rom. I believe Merlin is in that place too. Be careful, milady. Well then, I will excuse myself. Reinhard bowed his head to Artoria and walked away after strapping his usual sword that was laid on the nearby bench on his waist. Artoria looked at his knight, walked away and then looked at the sky. Well, let's meet Merlin before he played a prank on Felt or Rom. She walked to the nearby bench where she put Excalibur and Avalon. She strapped them on her waist and then nodded her head. Alright. Hey, white hair. Stop running around. A young girl with blonde hair was running after a white-haired man in the robe. She chased him around the slum while being watched with the resident of the slum with a smile on their face. The slum residents had gotten used to the sight because the man had visited the slum for a few days now. At first, they were wary of the man, but he proceeded to take out the criminal in the slum one by one. There was a time when Reinhard joined the white-haired man, Merlin, and brought the criminal to jail. Their complexion also got better after someone who claimed to be king's candidate shared a lot of food for the slum residents. Oh I. You bastard. Change back my gender. The girl, Felt's shout had gotten louder as she pulled knives from her pocket and threw them towards Merlin. However, those knives were caught between Merlin's fingers without him looking back. Isn't it better that way? With your personality, being a boy is better than being a girl. Ha ha ha. Merlin's laugh was loud enough to be heard all across the slum. Rom was watching them running around near his house with a tired gaze. When will the young miss arrive? She's the only one who can stop them. Ha dash. He sighed and rested his head on his head while looking at Felt and Merlin. For some reason, the magician came to him with Artoria. She said that she asked the magician called Merlin to find someone fit to be trained as a knight amongst the resident. Rom at first was wary of the man, but his action the next day changed it all. He was playful and loved messing around with Felt for some reason. You. I am a girl, you bastard. And Rom saw that Felt somehow opened up to Merlin a bit faster than usual. When Rom was thinking about that, he heard a familiar voice from his side. They are at it again. He looked at the source of the voice and saw Artoria look at Merlin and Felt with a tired face. Young miss. You've come. Rom raised his voice intentionally so Merlin and Felt can hear him. And he succeeded. Merlin stopped running and Felt was able to catch up to Merlin. Now change it back, you bastard. Ha ha ha, fine. You managed to touch me, so I will change it back. Merlin tapped his wand to the ground and pink light surrounded Felt's body. She immediately felt that something was gone, and she smiled. Finally. She shouted and kicked Merlin at his shin before she ran towards Artoria. Ouch! Merlin, who was kicked, rubbed his shin with his hand before shouting, that hurt you little. Felt looked back at Merlin and stuck her tongue out. I don't care, you white-haired old man. Merlin was not offended with it, he smiled instead and then walked to Artoria. Nay-san, what are we going to do today? Felt asked Artoria when she reached her. Both of them had gotten closer these past few days, and Felt began to think of Artoria as her real sister. I have to ask something to Rom. I heard that the mercenaries that you sent to protect that boy had returned. I wanted to talk to them. Oh, those guys, huh? I can call them if you wanted to, Nay-san. Said Felt as she raised her right hand. Rom looked at Felt with a smile and Artoria patted her head. Artoria was only a bit taller than Felt, but because their hair was similar, they looked like sisters that got along well. Merlin stopped beside Rom and looked at them with a smile on his face as he held his wand with his right hand. Then I am counting on you. Said Artoria as she pulled her hand from Felt's head. Oh. Wait here for a minute, I will call them quickly. Felt ran with a fast speed after she said that. She waved her hand when she was running and Artoria sent her with a smile. When Felt was gone from her sight, her expression turned serious, and looked at Rom. Any information about other camps, old man Rom? Her tone changed into a stern tone. She had asked Rom for information that Merlin couldn't cover. Merlin indeed had clairvoyance, but Artoria preferred to keep his ability a secret. They still didn't know any strange abilities that someone had in this world. That was why Merlin suggested to not use the clairvoyance as much as he can. Both of them knew a person that could detect clairvoyance, and that person even realized that he was under Merlin's watch. Artoria knew that person was special, as he was her knight. But, that proves Merlin's clairvoyance could be detected by someone in this world. To gain information, they must rely on the traditional method. Word of mouth and espionage. Young miss, it was surprising that you can change your tone easily. It still surprises me, till this day. Said Rom as he laughed. She has a great teacher. Merlin added Rom's words and nodded his head repeatedly as he crossed his arms. Artoria looked at Merlin with a strange expression. Even if Merlin was her tutor, all he did was teach her the basics. Rom noticed Artoria's expression and laughed louder. Ha ha ha, both of you are really close to each other. Well, putting that aside, let's go inside. Rom pointed at the door of his house. Artoria nodded her head at Rom, acknowledging the gesture. He turned away and guided Artoria and Merlin inside the house. All of the pieces of furniture inside the house were repaired, that was including the bar that was destroyed in Elsa's attack. Rom gestured for Artoria to sit on the bar. She and Merlin sat side by side and Rom put 2 mugs of drink in front of them. Merlin's staff was put against the bar, and he looked at the mug happily. Because he was told that Artoria had already an adult, he gave both of them red wine, a delicacy in the slum. After giving them the drinks, Rom started to talk. There are no strange movements from Priscilla and Anastasia camps. Crush Karsten Sama is busy with the party and she is trying to deepen the relationship of her camp with the noble. He paused a little, and Artoria noticed something strange. How about Amelia Camp? Rom had excluded Amelia Camp from the report. It was strange. He shook his head and answered. My boys can't find them. After that boy had recovered from the wound that he got from the sloth archbishop, he tried to find the Margrave. Ah, said the best magician of this kingdom. I wanted to meet him, said Merlin as he put his elbow on the bar, holding a cup in his hand. Yes, Roswell L. Mathers. He didn't present in his territory, and his location was unknown. Oh, that's interesting. So Amelia Camp made their move to find Roswell L. Mathers? Asked Artoria. Rom nodded his head in approval. That's what I thought. But, then my boy heard something from the villagers in Mathers' territory. They said that the boy, Subaru, suddenly had a scary look on his face when he was walking around the village. It happened suddenly as if he realized something right at that moment. Arturia's eyes widened at that and looked at Merlin. Merlin also looked back at Artoria with a smile on his face. Something happened, and it was centered at the boy again. Merlin said. Artoria nodded her head seriously. Then as we thought previously? Asked Artoria. Merlin didn't say anything, he just nodded his head affirmatively. Artoria then looked at Rom and said. Thank you, old man Rom. I will trouble you with the other thing. That's enough. Fine, just leave that to me. I had decided to help you and joined your camp after all. Rom said with a smile on his face. His smile was a kind one, it was in a contrast to his scary face. Although he was huge, he was really kind inside. Artoria smiled at him and stood up. Merlin also stood up after emptying his mug. Thanks for the drink, he said to Rom. Oh, come back again. I can only help that much. That's enough, I really appreciated your help, said Artoria as she walked away. Merlin followed her and they exited Rom's house. Future sight or some kind of time traveling. That boy, Subaru, now we are certain about something, said Artoria in a low voice that could only be heard by Merlin. They stopped in the alley of the slum. Merlin put his hood on and cast a bounded field to prevent any prying eyes. Yes, my king. You said that you are certain that boy was from Earth, right? Artoria nodded her head. Merlin's face turned serious and he said. Then there is a possibility. That boy, he could be a magician who wields the fifth magic, blue. Or, he could even be the wielder of second magic, kaleidoscope. Technically, that magic also involved time. If he's from Earth, that possibility can't be erased. This turned into something absurd at a fast speed. Artoria muttered as he held her head with her right hand. Indeed, answered Merlin. Artoria and Merlin continued their walk. Their destination was a place where Rom's friends lived. The two mercenaries that Rom sent to help Artoria to protect Subaru also lived in the place where they were headed to. Felt had gone first to call them, but because she took too long, Artoria decided to visit the place herself with Merlin. By the way, Merlin, have you visited the place where we headed to? Artoria asked Merlin as they walked out of the slum. The location of the house where the mercenary lived was a bit away from the slum, it was located in a decent place. They were now walking on the street that was filled with the citizens of the capital. Yes. I was the one who chose the house where they are living at after all. Merlin boasted as he puffed his chest arrogantly. He looked at Artoria with a grin on his face, it somehow irritated Artoria. Her expression turned into a frown and looked at Merlin as if he was an eyesore. You didn't need to boast like that. But, you are the one who finds the house. How? Technically, we have no money at all. Hoo hoo hoo. Merlin let out a creepy laugh before he spread his hands with a happy face. Do you think that this Merlin just playing around for a few days? I made a business in this capital city and managed to gain some funds for our operation. Artoria looked at Merlin with a surprised gaze. She then had a big smile on her face and clapped her hands a few times. That's amazing. So, what's your business? The cheerful Merlin suddenly looked away suspiciously. Artoria, who saw that, narrowed her eyes and asked again, this time with a cold tone. Your business? She asked slowly, word by word to Merlin. At her tone, Merlin sweated and then raised her index finger. Flower, answered Merlin bluntly. Explain in detail. Still talking with her cold tone, Artoria ordered Merlin. Merlin turned to look at Artoria slowly, gave her a big smile, and scratched the back of his head. I was given money by some flower. I see. Artoria crossed her arms and nodded her head a few times. In short, you are playing around with women. But, instead of paying them, you were the one who got paid. Is that it? With a big smile on his face, Merlin gave Artoria a thumb up with closed eyes. Both of them stopped on the spot. The pedestrians evaded them without minding too much because of Artoria's night uniform. That's the simplest explanation. Merlin prepared himself to get slapped, punched, or whatever Artoria did. However, after waiting for a few seconds, nothing came to him. He opened his eyes slowly and looked at Artoria, who now had a serious face. So, did you gain anything? The women that approached you came from the noble house, right? I did find something. It looked like the Artoria mansion you lived at was not the main mansion. It was something that your knight bought a long time ago, and now it was used to house you, my king. Your knight, Reinhard, often visited the manor after his patrol, but I thought it was not something worthy of concern. Sir Reinhard has his own life to live, I won't interfere with his personal life. But, I would like to visit the manor someday to greet his parents. Any other thing? Both of them continued their walk and talked without looking at each other. I found something about one of the king candidates, Priscilla Bariel. The girls talked about her a lot of times that I found something interesting. Oh, do tell me. That girl's way of talk reminded me of something unpleasant from the 4th and 5th Holy Grail War. After getting a lot of my memories back, I also remembered the time when the guy who trampled over my chivalry with his command seal. 4th Grail War, that's interesting. So you got memories of that time. Did she remind you of King Gilgamesh? If you got your memories of that time, soon, maybe, memories of the Lion King will come back to you? Artoria's eyes widened in realization. Lion King, the Artoria in singularity. She chose a different way to rule her people, but all of her knights were still alive and served her, except for Bedivere who tried to stop her. Don't joke around, Merlin. If I had the memories of me who became the Lion King in that singularity, doesn't that mean I have that weapon? Yes, you do have that weapon in your arsenal. But, for now, I am the one who holds the keys. Remember the 13 restraints? To use that, you need me to remove them. I see. So that lance is still sealed like the one that the Gravekeeper held. I'm happy that I have more arsenal, but I am worried if my personality would change after I got her memories. Now, you can continue about your information. Well, I certainly love all Artoria the same, and you know about it. Then let me continue. The candidate Priscilla's origin is not known, but there is one thing that the nobles know. Priscilla was sold to this country because of her beauty, she had a lot of husbands, and they had all died. She came from an unknown origin, and all of her late husbands had died. However, that didn't change the fact that she was chosen as the king candidate. You're right, my king. How about we continue our conversation later, we have arrived. Merlin stopped in front of a big house with a wall around it. The courtyard was huge, and there were a lot of training equipment made from woods and rocks scattered around. This is not a house, this is a training camp. Shouted Artoria as she pointed her index finger at the house, or rather, training camp in front of her. Ha ha ha, welcome to the Camelot's Barak, my king. Artoria had a wry smile on her face. He even calls this place Camelot's Barak. The first thing that caught Artoria's attention when she entered the Barak was 10 men running around the field while being chased by Felt. When Felt ran from Ram's house earlier, she said that she will call the mercenary that acted as Subaru's guard. She never came back to Ram's house, and that worried Artoria a little. But, it turned out that Felt had chased the men around the field while running. Why did Felt chase them around? Artoria asked Merlin, the one who had visited the Barak. She was sure that Merlin knew the reason why Felt was chasing the men around the field, as well as the reason why Felt didn't come back to Ram's house. She was training them. I had planned to take you here since the start, so I asked Felt to wait for us in this place. As expected. Well, you are the one who loves boasting your achievement, so I had expected that. Merlin looked at Artoria and then laughed. Ha ha ha, there is nothing wrong with showing my achievement to my king, isn't there? Naturally, I wanted you to meet the recruit too. I found some people from the slum and asked them to come here. Please give them a word or two and show them who their lady is. I guess that is to be expected. Very well, I will give them a word or two later. But, what do you think? How is their strength compared to those from Camelot? Merlin pondered while stroking his chin with his hand. His left hand was crossed and he looked at the people who were chased by Felt seriously. The majority of them can't use magic. I had read the magic theory of this world, and I tried to apply it. But, the system is too different from magecraft, and I can't use it at all. Gate, huh? Maybe Sir Reinhard can help you. Merlin tilted his head behind while still stroking his chin. No, he's a knight. We need a magician from this world who can help us. That was a troublesome matter. Artoria pondered a little. Both of them stopped a bit away from the field, and Felt noticed them. Ah, Nay-san. She shouted while waving her hand to Artoria. The men who were chased by Felt looked at Artoria, following Felt's gaze. They were stunned a little and stopped running when they saw Artoria. Confused, they were murmuring to each other. Felt, who heard the murmur of the people near her, turned to them and shouted. Hey! Start running again. Do you want to be turned into a girl by Merlin? The men in front of Felt got scared at the mention of Merlin. They then looked at Merlin, who was still pondering deeply before starting to run around the field again. Nay-san, they still have 5 laps left. I will go to you after they are done. Felt chased the men again while shouting. Pick up your pace, you lazy bastard. I will castrate you myself if I catch you. Yes, ma'am. All men answered to Felt at the same time, and they started running again. Ah! Merlin let out a gasp as if there was an inspiration that came to him. He smiled and then looked at Artoria while spreading his arms. My king. I know the easy way. Why don't we teach them how to use mana with our system? I had trained a lot of knights in the past, so I can teach them the basic use of mana to use reinforcement. We don't need magic circuits, we can make use of their gate and teach them how to utilize mana. Artoria's eyes widened and she asked. Is that possible? Merlin nodded his head and lowered his arms. I believe that's possible. I need a few days to see their progress, also. What is it? Just say it, Merlin. I need Sir Reinhardt to teach them about how to use their gate. Artoria nodded her head seriously and then smiled. I will tell him about it. So, how many people are in this barack? There are 30 people under Ram, and I had recruited 20 people, including the one who ran in the field right now. That's far from enough, huh? Artoria was a bit disappointed by the result. She had expected around 100 men, but Merlin and Ram only managed to gather 50 people. Don't be disappointed, my king. You must have known it yourself. In the world with magic, a number didn't mean anything. Individual strength often beats a number. Let's say that we are facing a force of 5,000 normal men, just the 2 of us are enough to annihilate them. Well, that's true. Call them then, I will be waiting in front of the field. Merlin put his right hand on his chest and bowed to Artoria. Certainly, my king. 50 men wearing a grey shirt and brown pants lining up in front of Artoria. All of them had a sword that was strapped to their waist. The sword was nothing fancy like Artoria's Excalibur, but they were normal iron swords with adequate sharpness. They were looking forward with a serious face. None of them dared to sneak peek at Artoria's face even though she stood in front of them. Felt was standing on Artoria's left with a haughty pose and frown on her face, intimidating the men. Merlin stood on Artoria's right while holding his wand, and he was looking at the men in front of him seriously. Alright, all of you must have known the reason why I called and gathered you in this field. Merlin shouted at the men and all of them answered at the same time. Yes, sir. They shouted with all of their might with their hands behind their hips. Anyone who saw them will have the same thought, these men are a trained knight. Their level had reached that far with just a few days of training. That showed Merlin's capability as a trainer, and Artoria once again was satisfied. My king, Artoria Pendragon-sama will give you a word after this. I hope all of you will hear it clearly. She will be the one you will fight under, make sure to follow her command as your first priority. Yes, sir. My king. Merlin said to Artoria and extended his right hand, gesturing Artoria to step forward. Artoria stepped forward and unsheathed Excalibur. She stabbed the blade on the ground and then she shouted. Men. As you've heard, my name is Artoria Pendragon. I will say this only once, so hear it clearly. Yes, sir. Hearing the men's answer, Artoria nodded in satisfaction and then continued. Maybe some of you are still asking, why are we trained this hard? The answer to that is, I wanted to build an army under me. An army that's stronger than the Knights of Lugnica. Men, I promise you, that you will become strong. The men then looked at Artoria. They were amazed by her speech and were looking at Artoria seriously. I don't understand your feeling, but I know some of you had left your loved one in order to come here. Don't worry, I won't forbid you to meet them again. On the contrary, bring them here. You guys are my men, my subordinates. But, more importantly, if we are in war, you guys are my comrade in arms. I will trust you guys with my life, so trust me with your life. Artoria's energy in her speech managed to ignite the men's spirit. Their fists were clenched behind their hips, they had a smile on their face. So men, are you ready for the harsh training? I will promise you, you will become strong enough to pass Lugnica Knight's examination right after the training. Yes. The answer came back louder than the previous one. Well then, men. Welcome to my army. I, Artoria Pendragon, will promise you. If I become the king of Lugnica, there will be no more place called slum. We will reform it, for the better future. Artoria raised her right hand to the air while her left hand was still on Excalibur's handle. The men raised their right hand right after Artoria and shouted. Oh you. For the future. After her speech, Artoria left the newly built troop to Merlin and went towards the office that was built for her with Felt. Because Felt had visited the barracks a few times, she knew the location of the office. She guided Artoria inside the building and proceeded to the highest floor. The building had 4 floors. The first floor was filled with bathrooms, a warehouse, and a cafeteria. The second and third floors were the sleeping quarter for the troops while the fourth floor was the office and guest rooms. They also built Artoria's room right beside the office, in case she wanted to sleep in the room after working on documents until late at night. Her main residence right now was still Reinhard's mansion. She now called it Reinhard's mansion after she knew that there was a different Astria manor in the capital. Nay-san. I got my own room here too, so if you wanted to stay here, I will stay with you. They were now walking on the 4th floor of the building. There was only 5 rooms, with one of the room having a double door. That was Artoria's office, and it was located right in front of the stairs. On top of the door was a sign with the words, office, written in Lugnica's language. So my room is located on the left of the office while your room is located on the right of the office, is that it, Felt? Artoria, who was guided by Felt, had remembered everything and she asked only for confirmation. Yeah. But I still sleep in old man Ram's house sometimes. But, if you want my company, you can call me anytime, Nay-san. Felt was beamed in a smile and she raised her right hand full of spirit. Artoria smiled at Felt and petted her head when she saw her adorable act. Thank you, Felt, but I think that it will be hard. You are training with Merlin too, right? When Artoria mentioned Merlin, Felt's smile crumbled from her face and her expression changed into that of displeasure. Why must I learn from that guy? He's terrible, I tell you. Artoria chuckled and crouched a little to match Felt's gaze. Even if Merlin loves pranks, he will not do anything that went past a line. Even though she was the one who said that when she remembered what Merlin did to Artoria in Camelot, she turned her face away from Felt. Maybe. Artoria lowered her hand that was on Felt's head and put her hands on top of her knees. Nay-san. Felt had a concerned tone and looked at Artoria with an understanding gaze. So he did something to you, huh? Ha 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 ha. With an awkward smile, Artoria turned to Felt again and stood up. Let's not talk about that. But, you will be able to get stronger if you train with Merlin. At least you can trust him in that matter. Felt looked at Artoria suspiciously. It was not like she didn't trust Merlin's strength, but she didn't think that the prankster would be able to train her to become stronger. Seeing Felt's expression, Artoria smiled and put her hands on her hips. You don't believe him? Felt nodded her head. Yeah, Nay-san. He's a magician, right? How can he train me as a scout? He can. Although Merlin looked like that, he's my tutor too in the past and now. No way. Shouted Felt. That's true, so you can count on him too. By the way, shall we go down to the cafeteria? Isn't it lunchtime? Right. Let's go. Both of them entered the cafeteria and Artoria was looking around. The cafeteria was big and now all the people from the troop gathered here for lunch. There were around 15 long tables and 30 long chairs. Each table had 2 chairs on each side, so the troops sat together and ate their meal with each other. These arrangements were proposed by Merlin to add solidarity to the troops. They will be able to chat with each other, deepening their bonds. So, when they were on the battlefield, they will cover each other without any need for order. Their morale will also stay at its best when they knew that they had reliable comrades beside them. Merlin also asked Artoria to visit the troops when she had the time to. Now, she planned to eat together with them and Felt. A lot of them were already eating, only 5 people were lined up to wait for their food. Unexpectedly, Merlin had yet to line up and was waiting for Artoria near the door of the cafeteria. My king, you have arrived. I have prepared your meal, please follow me. Oh, Merlin. Good job. Artoria answered Merlin. Felt was hiding behind Artoria when she saw Merlin, afraid that she will become a target of his prank again. Merlin looked at Felt with an amused gaze. He put his hand on his chin and smirked at Felt while muttering. What should I do next? Because of Artoria's superhuman body spec, she was able to hear what Merlin muttered and looked at him with a narrowed gaze. Merlin, it's better if you decrease your prank against Felt. Train her to become a good scout. Oya, I am busted. Don't worry, my king. I was training her all this time. Right now I trained her lower body by making her chase after me at her highest speed. If she's able to catch me, then her training is over. I know about that, but think about Felt's feeling. Artoria glanced at Felt that held her clothes and saw her nodding her head a few times. Merlin also looked at Felt. But, when their gaze met with each other, Felt stuck her tongue out. Bleh. Merlin laughed at what he saw and then turned to Artoria. I guess I will change my target then. He had a rather playful smile that made Artoria feel a chill on her back. She quickly raised her hands in front of her and said. When I think about it again, I guess you can train Felt as you like. Use whatever method that you see fit. Well then, I am hungry so I will eat my meal first. Artoria ran at a fast speed, leaving Felt with Merlin. Nne-san. How could you? Felt shouted and extended her hand in an attempt to stop Artoria. However, Artoria didn't even stop and she sat in the chair that Merlin had prepared in advance. Thanks for the meal. She clapped her hands while looking at the ceiling. Sorry Felt, but I don't want to become Merlin's target. The troops that saw that were laughing. They didn't know that Artoria, their superior, would be the kind of girl that could joke around. The atmosphere turned better and they ate their meal happily, with the sacrifice of one unlucky girl. After lunch, the troops were gathered in the field for afternoon training. Artoria joined them to boost their morale even further, and Felt also joined the training while they were supervised by Merlin who stood on the side of the field. Right now, they were running while wearing full plate armor. Artoria and Felt were the exceptions, as Artoria wore Lugnika's night outfit, and Felt wore her usual clothes. Come on. Shout louder. Merlin's shout could be heard from the side and the troops answered him by shouting. Yes sir. 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. Artoria was the one who led their shout and the troops matched their steps with Artoria's instruction. 1-2, 1-2, 1-2. Because Felt was trained to be a scout, she went ahead of the troops, even from Artoria. She ran at full speed to build her stamina and agility. Oh you. Felt shouted louder than even the troops as she passed them from behind. You guys are slow. Run faster or you will be punished. Merlin shouted again and the troops began to run faster, they had almost passed Artoria. Artoria was not running at her full speed, but when she felt the troops get closer to her, she increased her pace to keep her position in front of the troops. 1-2, 1-2. 1-2, 1-2. Their running training lasted for an hour before they got tired and collapsed on the ground. Almost all people in the troops were now collapsed on the ground, leaving only 2 men who can stand in their legs. Although they were able to stand, they had a rough breath. They were the mercenaries that Artoria met in the subjugation of Hakugiai. Both of them were the ones who were tasked to protect Subaru that day. Artoria gestured to Merlin and both of them approached the guys. Frederick, Ryan. It's nice to meet you guys again. Artoria greeted both of them and they saluted to her. It's an honor. They didn't act like mercenaries now. Instead, they had acted like a knight. All of that was because of Merlin's training in the past few days. Be at ease. We are on the training ground right now. We are here because we wanted to ask that matter. Do you mind following us to my office? Both of them looked at each other for a second before nodding their head. They then looked at me. Yes sir. Now the 4 of them were in Artoria's office. The office had a desk and an extravagant chair behind the desk. There were 2 couches in front of the desk for the guest to sit on. Frederick and Ryan stood in front of the desk though, as they were Artoria's subordinates, not her guest. Merlin stood behind Artoria and looked at Frederick and Ryan with a smile. Artoria was sitting on her chair with her elbow on the table. Her hands were joined and she put them near her mouth. Can you tell us what happened in the attack against the Sin Archbishops? Yes, I will tell you about it. At first, we are going to the meeting place normally. Frederick started to tell Artoria the story of their subjugation with a serious face. Their hands were resting behind their back, and it was a formal report, so Merlin took a note of their report behind Artoria in a notebook that he took out from his robe. After we arrived at the meeting place, we greeted Natsuki Subaru. He was peculiar and there was a blue-haired maid who accompanied him. My first meeting with Natsuki Subaru was normal, and then we were talking about the strategy to hunt the witch cultist with the finest knight, Julius Juculius. Artoria nodded her head in understanding. So far, the story of Frederick was something that she had guessed. The situation was normal at that time. Julius Juculius suggested to us about evacuating the villagers from the danger, and then he will command the troops to kill the Sin archbishops. Natsuki Subaru also clenched his fist and supported Julius's idea. Frederick continued. Hearing the strategy, Artoria smiled a little. That's the best strategy at that time, I guess. So the troops finally evacuated the villagers after the strategy meeting? Artoria was waiting for Frederick to nod his head. However, he didn't nod his head but shook it instead. No, milady. After the finest knight suggested his strategy, the look of Natsuki Subaru changed. He instantly looked down on the floor with his eyes bulging out, as if he was afraid of something. It was strange because earlier, he happily supported Julius Juculius's idea. Merlin stopped noting the report and narrowed his eyes. He looked at Artoria and she also narrowed her eyes in suspicion. Continue. Asked Artoria in a serious tone. Yes. I didn't believe my ears at that time, but Natsuki Subaru suddenly shouted and denied the strategy that he supported earlier. He said that it was not going to work and slammed the table that was used for the strategy meeting with both of his hands. What? Artoria let out a surprised sound. If he did that, then as she thought. Sorry about that. You can continue. Frederick gulped his saliva. He was a bit afraid of Artoria after he heard what she did in the subjugation of Hakugiai. When facing her directly, he actually didn't dare to even look straight in her eyes and just looked at her forehead or nose. Natsuki Subaru then proceeded to propose a new strategy which was ridiculous. He said we need to kill all of the witch cultists first before we took out the Sin archbishop. His eyes at that time radiated a strong will, and he strongly said that only Julius Juculius could kill the Sin archbishop. He didn't tell us his reason, but we reluctantly followed the strategy because it didn't really different from the previously suggested strategy. Frederick paused a little and then Ryan continued his story. I was the one who accompanied Natsuki Subaru at that time. We met the Sin Archbishop of Sloth with Julius Juculius. The Sin Archbishop was strong, and he was crazy. His name was Beetlejuice Romanicanti. Something strange happened again when we were facing the Sin Archbishop. Tell me about it. Ryan nodded his head and then he said seriously. Beetlejuice had a strange ability. His ability was called Invisible Hands, and it was a dangerous ability that cannot be seen by naked eyes. He said that only the loved one could see the hands, and Natsuki Subaru definitely could see Beetlejuice's invisible hands. Artoria's eyes narrowed even further. She then looked at Merlin and saw him nod his head. I will look over him, my king. I am counting on you, Merlin. Be careful though, he's still mysterious. Of course, my king. Artoria then looked at Frederick and Ryan. She lowered her hands and smiled at them. That's enough, you may leave. Get a good rest and keep your training tomorrow. Frederick and Ryan were confused, but they saluted at Artoria and then answered. Yes sir. They turned around and exited the office, leaving Artoria with Merlin. Then my king, I will call Sir Reinhard. I will not be able to accompany you for a few days to observe Natsuki Subaru. Yes, Merlin. Once again, be careful. Merlin smiled at Artoria before disappearing, leaving petals of pink flowers behind. A day passed. Artoria stayed in her new room in the barrack after she told Reinhard about it. She told him that she wanted to look after the training of her new troops, and he allowed her to stay reluctantly. Merlin had gone for a night already. He was now collecting information about Natsuki Subaru, the man that Artoria suspected as magician who hold the fifth magic, blue. The magic has a connection with time, which was similar to Subaru's ability to somehow know the future. The morning routine in the barrack was simple. Artoria woke up and then washed her face. She then changed into Lugnika's night uniform, put her Excalibur and Avalon strapped in her waist, and went out the field to look at the troops' training. She was in charge of the training today while Merlin was working his ass, collecting the information about their rivals. When she arrived at the training field, the troops had lined up nicely in 5 rows to the back. Each row consisted of 10 men. Felt was nowhere to be seen. The sun had yet to rise, so Artoria guessed that Felt was still sleeping in her room. Artoria stood in front of the rose and then looked around before she shouted. Alright, can one of you tell me your usual morning training? I ordered Merlin for something, so he won't be able to look after you today. The troops' faces brightened. They were happy because that white-haired bastard was not here to make a mess. Don't be too happy. Artoria's next word made the troops look at her. She then smiled happily while looking at the troops. Someone that I trained a long time ago said that my training was similar to a lion. As you know, maybe, lions sent their cub to the dangerous forest alone, without any company. So, be prepared for my training. It was as if hope had left them, the troops' face turned grim in an instant. They had yet to start, but they had a bad feeling, especially the former mercenaries under Ram. They looked at Artoria as if she was a monster, the witch that destroyed the world. We are dead. Most of the troops had the same thought and gulped their saliva at the same time when they looked at Artoria's harmless smile. Well then, troops. Took a position to run. For now, let's see. Artoria looked at the field and then nodded her head a little. 50 laps will do. I will run behind you, and anyone that's taken over by me will get punishment later. The troops were silent, they didn't believe what they heard. Artoria was a bit displeased by the silence, so she narrowed her eyes and shouted. Is that clear? Finally, the troops had snapped out of their surprise and shouted. Yes, sir. Then run now. Artoria now had no other activities except for training the troops. There was nothing she could do in the meantime. Merlin was collecting the information. To act in the future, she needed that information. The information that she got from Reinhard was insufficient. He only knew something inside the capital, or he deliberately didn't tell Artoria about the situation outside the capital. Artoria trusted Reinhard, but she knew that Reinhard was chained to the law too. She further researched Reinhard's law that was established by the country, and it was ridiculous. That was why. I'm really glad that Merlin is here. I can ask him something that Sir Reinhard doesn't know or can't divulge to me. Artoria found something that restricted Reinhard's action in the law. He couldn't act freely outside of Lugnica, and he must follow the authorities' order. So, although he vowed to be Artoria's knight, he still needed to run some errand for Sage Council. He also can't divulge any secret that the Sage Council ordered him to keep. If the Sage Council ordered Reinhard to not tell Artoria about the situation outside Lugnica, then Reinhard won't tell Artoria. The case was different for Merlin. He was Artoria's direct man, he didn't have any law that restrict him to act freely. Hence, even Reinhard was glad that Merlin could help Artoria. However, even at the Sage Council's order, Reinhard had no obligation to tell them about Artoria. He was a knight, so he will keep his vow. The troops had passed 10 laps as Artoria thought about the information that she had right now. The pace of their run had slowed down a little. She noticed that and shouted from behind. The punishment will be another 50 laps. Keep your pace, soldiers. When the troops knew about the punishment, their pace was back to normal again. They were shouting with all their energy. That's good, 40 laps to go. Artoria was also happy to see that they had the zeal to finish their training. Ugh. After a while, the troops finished their 50 laps. They collapsed as soon as they finished running. The field was big, so 50 laps were too much even for trained knights. However, Artoria was fine. She was standing amongst the collapsed soldiers while crossing her arms. AP Pendragon Sama, how could you be fine after running 50 laps? The soldier that collapsed near Artoria asked her while trying to catch his breath. He was sitting while looking up at Artoria from the side. That's still not much though. Artoria herself was confused. But then she noticed something. Come to think of it, did Avalon recover my fatigue too? That's good then. She then looked around the troops and smiled. Well then, let's have breakfast. You guys deserve it. The troops were happy, they raised their hands and praised Artoria. Goddess. She's a goddess if we compare her with that white-haired bastard. One of the soldiers put his hand together as if he was praying to Artoria. Oh, I'm sorry for calling you demon earlier, Pendragon Sama. She's an angel, guys. I want her to be our trainer from now on. They keep calling Artoria with a lot of monikers. It made Artoria think. Merlin, how bad were you managing the troop? They are happy with just getting a breakfast time. Alright, go clean yourself and get your ass to the cafeteria. We will continue the training after breakfast. Yes, sir. Merlin, who was ordered by Artoria, arrived at Margrave Mather's territory. He was walking on the road between the forest while holding his wand. His hood was lowered to hid his face, but his white clothes and hair were standing out. The road was empty, with not even a carriage passed. While walking, Merlin was looking around cautiously. Maybe as were roaming around in the world, he wouldn't lower his guard like a fool. The only reason why he chose to walk instead of taking a carriage was simple, so he could enjoy it. It was not like being with Artoria didn't enjoyable for him, but he also loved seeing the world with his own eyes, not through his clairvoyance. There is nothing unusual. He muttered while touching his chin with his right hand. No bandits, no maybeists. Without the existence of bandits on the road, the journey was smooth sailing. It made one wonder, how could there not be a single bandit on the road between the capital of Ludnica and Margrave Mather's territory? Either the knight's order was competent, or there was no bandit in the first place because of the witch cult's existence. Merlin would love the first possibility because that meant Ludnica was strong enough to eradicate the bandits in their territory. However, I felt no presence of people in this area. That's a bit strange. Mathers was a Margrave. It was strange that there was no big city on his way towards his destination. In the report of Frederick and Ryan, they also said that there was only a village near Mathers's mansion, Amelia's residence. I tried to look at the boy using my clairvoyance, but somehow it was blurry. There is a bounded field strong enough to block it. That's interesting. The reason why he visited the Mathers territory was that he couldn't look at the boy. His clairvoyance was blocked by someone or a bounded field that surround the boy. He then tried to look into the so-called best magician in Ludnica, Roswell L. Mathers, but the result was the same. Artoria knew about that, and she asked me to investigate the Mathers territory. Ha, I'm glad that she's smart. She's a genius in strategy and art of war after all. Merlin was happy that his king in this time was smart enough. There was a lot of Artoria that he accompanied, Merlin accompanied through times and timeline. Artoria Lily, or so he called her, was the most naive one amongst the Artoria in other timelines. Zelrich give me a nice present before sending me to this world, to my king. That was why Merlin remembered all kinds of Artoria he accompanied through his life. But now I need to focus on my job. He arrived at a village that was mentioned in Frederick and Ryan's report. It was a rather small village, but the villagers seemed to look happy with their situation. The children were running around happily while the adults were working on the field and drew water from the well. Normal daily lives of villagers, and Merlin could sense something outside of the village. Bounded field. He felt mana surrounded the village, and the source was some sort of talisman. It was a bounded field, known as a barrier in this world. I heard from the report that it was made to protect the village from a beast attack. I need to study it later. Merlin was interested in the barrier, but it was not the time for him to analyze it. He entered the village and immediately became the center of attention. One of the adults in the village, an elder, approached Merlin. Hello, are you by chance a traveler? Welcome to Earlham village. Merlin just know the village name, and he nodded his head. Yes, I am a traveler that passed through this village by chance. Merlin answered the elder with a smile on his face. Although the upper side of the face was hidden by his hood, his mouth was still visible. The elder smiled back at Merlin. Ho, you are a peculiar traveler then. The forest around this village is filled with woolgarms. I advise you to not cross the small bridge that led to the forest. Thank you for your advice. May I stay in this village for an hour or so? I have been walking since morning, and it was now noon. I plan to rest for a while. Don't worry, you can stay. Most of the villagers were evacuated to a different place, and now it was just around 20% of us here. We are happy to lend you a place to rest if you want to. Merlin narrowed his eyes a little at the information that the elder gave him. That was right, the village was evacuated. Frederick and Ryan also said that, but there was only 20% of the villager left in the village. Where did the rest of the villagers go? If I may ask, what happened to the rest of the villagers? No, why did the villagers need to be evacuated? It's difficult to say it, because it's related to the witch cult. But, do you want to hear it? It may change your decision to stay in this village though. I don't mind, please tell me about it. Maybe as you can see, I'm a magician, I can protect myself. The elder turned his attention to the wand that Merlin held before sighing. Follow me, it's a bit of a long story, so let's find a place to sit. Merlin nodded his head. Please lead the way. The elder went to the center of the village. There was a fountain there. He sat on the fountain and asked Merlin to sit beside him. He then started his story, from the time when Subaru just arrived and suddenly shouted to leave the village. The villagers trust the boy's word because he saved the children from Woolgarms when he visited the village. They followed his words and some of the villagers, the old and children, were evacuated to Roswell's mansion that was located near the village while the majority of the villagers were brought to a different place called Sanctuary. The elder also told Merlin that they were evacuated because of witch cultists' attack. When Merlin asked the elder about Sanctuary's location, the elder said he didn't know the location of this sanctuary, but the place was suggested by the maid that was working on the Roswell's mansion. Merlin finally got a clue, this sanctuary must be the place where the boy stayed right now. Thank you, I think I will leave this village now. If what you said is true, then I will need to move right now. Thank you very much for the information, elder. Hahaha, no problem. Stay safe, young man. Traveling alone is dangerous, so buy some mount like a ground dragon when you have money. The elder was kind enough to give Merlin more advice. Merlin smiled at the elder and pulled a gold coin from his pocket. Please take this as a token of my gratitude. The elder looked dumbfounded when he took the gold coin. He looked at it with his mouth gaped, then he turned to Merlin. You dash. When he looked up again, Merlin had disappeared. There was only a petal of flowers on the ground, and the elder was looking around in confusion. Who is that young man? After getting the information from the elder, Merlin made his way towards the forest where the battle had occurred. He wanted to find a trace of mana that could be used to trace the witch cultist as well as make sure that the Sin Archbishop had really died. A danger like Sin Archbishop wouldn't die that easily. Merlin met the two of them, and he didn't believe that the person who had the same position as the two of them really died while facing a knight from Lugnica. There was a matter of affinity, but there was nothing wrong with double-checking the situation directly. So this is the forest. From Frederick's report, they said that they hunted the witch cultists called the Fingers first. Merlin walked deeper into the forest. There was a mark of battle. The trees had slashing marks, the ground burned and gouged, and more importantly, there is a lot of blood mark. The grasses and bushes were covered in blood. It was already dry from the sun, but the traces were still there. No rain washed the trace away, after all, the sun had shone brightly for the past days. There is a trace of mana being used in this area. Merlin approached one of the trees that had a slashing mark and touched it. The mark was not deep enough to cut the tree, but it was not shallow too. A knight from Lugnica under that Julius Juculius seems to be a bit skilled. Not only investigating the area, but Merlin also wanted to know the skill of the so-called finest knight by looking at the mark that was left by the battle. Even though he looked like he was playing around in the capital, he was actually gathering information about this unknown world. Artoria didn't reprimand him for playing around in the capital was exactly because she knew what he had been doing. His king was certainly still a bit naive for now because of her origin, but she became better after her memories came back slowly. Her rationality now had made her realize that this world was not as kind as she thought. The capital was indeed in peace, and Lugnica was a strong nation. But with the threat from the witch cult meeting with her on her way back of Hakugiai's subjugation, she knew that the witch cult would be involved in the future as well. There was no way an organization that didn't even afraid of the king candidate would pull away after one of the Sin Archbishops was killed. No, Artoria and Merlin didn't even believe that the Sloth Archbishop was killed. Hence Merlin was investigating that matter right now. Magic was thrown around, but the source was from Elemental. Spirit, huh? If I remember correctly, Julius Juculius is a spirit user. Artoria wasn't allowed to hurt Elemental, no, she wouldn't be allowed to lift one of the restrain when fighting Elemental. Merlin himself didn't know whether the spirit in this world was an Elemental. The trace is similar to Elemental, but they are weaker. Merlin continued his investigation, this time he walked to the cave near the battle area. Frederick and Ryan didn't know how the Sin Archbishop died, so Merlin hoped to find at least a remnant of the witch cultists in the area. Clothes or anything, he wanted to find something so he could guess which area the witch cultist was hiding. That way, he could use his clairvoyance to monitor the suspected area. He could always use his clairvoyance to monitor the whole world, but he still didn't know the power that governed this world, so he chose a safer measure. If I accidentally found the hiding place of the witch, it would be troublesome. Merlin muttered to himself and then laughed happily. He didn't mind finding a witch and meeting her face to face, but his king would get a headache about it. My king is aiming to be a kind king in this time, so I need to do my best to help her, don't I? Merlin arrived in front of the cave and looked at it with interest. He felt a rather nasty feeling came from inside the cave. He was a bit sensitive to feelings, emotions because of his race. He touched his chin and then tapped his wand to the ground. He was looking at the cave with his clairvoyance, he didn't want to enter it. And as he had expected, a lot of nasty things were scattering around inside the cave. Corpses, a lot of corpses that looked like they were tortured before they died. Merlin's face contorted into an ugly frown. The expression was gone almost immediately, and he let out a sigh before turning around, leaving the cave. Well, my king must pass this wall alone, I will keep silent for now. I can't tell her about anything if this is how this world works. He realized that this world was actually only a little bit different from their homeworld. The things that made the two worlds the same were the humans and the ones who pursue magic. Merlin noticed that witch cultists had some plan, a goal that they pursue without caring about the other. Deep inside, the witch cult was similar to Clock Tower. The cultists were similar to Magus. The only difference between them was Magus's strife to reach the root, while the cultists' goal seems to be reaching Satella, the Witch of Envy. Merlin looked up at the sky and lamented. He loves humans, but he would never take the last step to cross the wall. She also need to grow used to this world. Merlin looked forward and began to walk again. This time, his destination was the capital of Lugnica, back to Artoria. He had a duty to make Artoria the king, and after his duty was over. After that, maybe I will look at this world a little. Playing around with my king's knights, and then I'll just do what I always do. It was something that he used to do, something that he, an immortal, must bear. His king was also immortal, or so to speak, but she had a lot of duty after she become a king, he must not bother her. Disappearing from everybody's memory. Well, it's just the usual, but this alone, I can never get used to it. With a refreshing smile on his face, Merlin was looking forward to what his king do in the future. 5 days passed after Merlin went to collect information. The days went like usual with Artoria looking after the soldiers. Reinhard also occasionally stopped in the barrack to give the soldiers a basic knowledge of knight's etiquette and the basic use of gate. He was helpful in that area, however, he was almost useless when Artoria asked him to have a spar with one of the soldiers. The problem was not that Reinhard couldn't spar with the soldier, but he was too strong. Even when he was holding back, the soldier couldn't even land a hit on him, causing the soldier to lose his confidence. Fortunately, Artoria stopped the spar immediately and asked the soldier that sparred with Reinhard to fight with another soldier. The day changed into the night changed into the morning. It was now the 6th day after Merlin went to collect information in Mather's territory. Artoria was standing on the side while the soldiers were running in the field with felt. Now they could easily run 50 laps without collapsing, showing the result of 5 days of training. When the soldiers passed the 40 laps, Artoria felt a presence behind her and turned around at a fast speed, raising her guard in case the one behind her was an assassin. What she saw behind her was a familiar man, it was Merlin. He raised his right hand. "I'm back." "Welcome back, how is it?" asked Artoria. "It's a bit interesting but..." Merlin smiled at Artoria and looked at the soldiers. The soldiers noticed Merlin and they all had a big smile on their faces. Finally. "He's back. We are free. What are you doing to them, my king?" asked Merlin to Artoria with a curious face. He looked at Artoria with interest as he stroked his chin. Artoria tilted her head in confusion. She looked at Merlin with an innocent face as if she didn't know something that she did was a little excessive. "Ha ha ha." Merlin laughed loudly while holding his stomach when he saw Artoria's reaction. "What's wrong?" asked Artoria in a concerned tone. She was worried about Merlin, especially after he had just come back from investigating Mather's territory. "Are you sick?" Merlin's laughter became louder after Artoria said that. "Ha ha ha, I'm sorry about that, my king." He was finally able to stop his laughing and look at Artoria. She was still looked confused. The soldiers in the distance were also done with the last 10 laps and approached Merlin by running. "White hair. We are glad that you come back to us." "Yeah. We love you, Merlin." Getting a confession from a female was an almost everyday thing for Merlin in the capital. However, this was the first time he got a love confession from soldiers. He then looked suspiciously at Artoria and asked. "So, my king. I will repeat my question." Artoria nodded her head a little, she had a feeling that she screwed up over something. "What did you to them, my king?" "They are happy to see me, and that's strange." Merlin pointed his index finger, pointing to the location behind Artoria. Artoria looked back and saw the soldiers had a big smile on their faces. Some of them even cried loudly while shouting, "Merlin! We're glad you had arrived." She now knew that she had screwed up. She slowly turned to Merlin and said, "The usual training of that boy. I still remember the time when I trained with him, he's able to do it." Merlin blinked a few times and asked, "I'm sorry. But who is that boy?" Artoria looked at Merlin with a little smile on her face. "The boy who wants to become the hero. I gave them his usual training. You know about him, no?" "Ah. You are talking about that boy." Merlin bumped his fist to his palm, as the image of the boy in question clicked in his mind. He then looked at Artoria with a smile. "I'm sorry, but are you crazy, my king? There is no way a normal soldier could withstand that training." "What did you say?" Artoria was a bit pissed when Merlin called her crazy. She raised her voice and pointed her index finger at him. "I am certainly not crazy. He was able to withstand the training when he was around 18 years old, and you told me that a trained soldier was not able to withstand the training regime?" "Sigh, of course not." Merlin sighed and looked at Artoria seriously. "My king, you are being surrounded by a lot of genius, maybe even monsters, so you will not realize the capability of normal soldiers." The soldiers behind Artoria nodded their heads repeatedly, agreeing with what Merlin had said. They will not be able to withstand the training that even the boy had a hard time of. And that boy in question is a future heroic spirit. That's just impossible. Artoria then knew what was wrong. She touched her chin for a while before looking back at the soldiers. They were indeed exhausted, their faces told her all about it. "I see, forgive me. I didn't account for that possibility." She never trained anyone in this world, so she took the standard of a boy that she trained before. Merlin said that the soldiers were not on the level of Camelot's knight, so she took the easiest training that she remembered. And that was when she was in the 5th Holy Grail Wars. "I will lower the difficulty of our training from now on," said Artoria. The soldiers' faces brightened and they saluted. "Yes, sir." Artoria smiled as she saw them. "Now, get some rest and eat in the cafeteria. All of you are dismissed." "Yes, sir." They shouted louder than before. With the same movement, they turned back and ran to the cafeteria, leaving Felt behind with Merlin and Artoria. "Now Merlin, let's go to the office and talk about the information that you get," said Artoria with a serious face. "Of course." She then turned to Felt. "Felt, can you call Ram to this place? I want to make use of his knowledge as an elder." "Oh, leave it to me, Nay-san." Felt raised her right hand and ran towards the exit of the barack. Seeing Felt disappear outside of the barack, Artoria turned to Merlin again. "Let's go." In the office, Merlin sat on the couch across from Artoria. They were waiting for Ram to arrive. "Merlin, did the report of Frederick and Ryan were true? You investigated the location where they exterminated the witch cultist, right?" Artoria asked Merlin in the middle of the wait, causing Merlin to look at Artoria with serious eyes. "Yes, the report was mostly correct. Because Frederick and Ryan didn't participate directly in the last battle, they didn't know whether the Sin Archbishop had dead or not." "That's concerning," said Artoria as she crossed her arms. Merlin stroked his chin with his right hand and looked up to the ceiling. "There is that too," he muttered in a low voice, but Artoria heard that. It was intentional to make Artoria suspicious of him. He glanced slightly to Artoria, and she did become suspicious of him. "What are you hiding? I wonder what is it?" Merlin answered with a playful voice as he touched his mouth with his index finger. "Just tell me about it and be done with it, Merlin." Artoria pressed her voice, appearing commanding with her tone. She narrowed her eyes as she looked at Merlin. Merlin laughed a little and raised both of his hands. His wand was leaned against the couch. He then lowered his hands and looked at Artoria seriously. "There is a possibility that the Sin Archbishop of Sloth has not died yet. Something is missing, his corpse." "Disturbing," said Artoria. "Anything else?" Merlin nodded his head. "On the way to the Mather's mansion, I felt a residue of mana. Magic was being used on the road. Frederick and Ryan didn't present such report, which means neither they weren't aware of it, nor they hid it." "No, they didn't hide anything." From outside of the door, a voice of a man ringed out. The voice was familiar, so Merlin and Artoria just looked at the voice that interrupted them. A second, 2 seconds, the door wasn't opened. At that point, Artoria realized something. "You may enter." She hadn't given permission yet. As soon as she said that, the door was opened and Reinhard stood outside of the door with Ram behind him. I apologize for interrupting your conversation, milady. No problem, Sir Reinhard. However, can you elaborate on what did you know about this matter? Certainly. Reinhard walked inside the room, followed by Rom. Because of his position as a knight, Reinhard just stood without sitting on the couch, leaving Rom standing awkwardly behind him. Rom, you can sit here if you want to. Merlin offered Rom to sit beside him as he moved to the side while holding his wand. Thank you. Rom said, and he sat beside Merlin. Seeing everyone was ready, Artoria looked at Reinhard. Continue. Yes. Frederick and Ryan were not lying in their report. I asked them again when we were in the training, and they are honest individuals, milady. I see, so the magic was used without them realizing it. Merlin, continue with the information. Merlin nodded his head. The villagers were evacuated by the maid of Roswell L. Matters. The elderly and kids were put in the mansion while the rest of the villagers were sent to a place called Sanctuary. Sir Reinhard, maybe you know this sanctuary location? Merlin asked Reinhard, and it made Artoria confused. She then realized it. No way. Merlin, are you serious? Rom tilted her head, he didn't understand what Artoria meant. Reinhard, who knew Merlin's power, was also surprised. He looked at Merlin, waiting for an answer. Yes, my king. I couldn't see them. There is a bounded field, a barrier that surrounds the place called Sanctuary. Whoever made the barrier is strong, it could be a witch. Everyone's eyes widened in surprise, especially Rom. He'd never thought that a witch would come out in the conversation, especially from Merlin. From what Rom knew, Merlin was the strangest magician that he met in all of his lifetimes. However, seeing Artoria's confidence in Merlin showed that Merlin could be depended on. A witch came out from that magician's name. The magician was trusted by Artoria. He said that he found a barrier that a witch made. Merlin, are you sure that a witch made the barrier? Merlin once again nodded his head, maybe. The magic that I felt was different from the normal magic around here. So I concluded that the barrier had a relation with a witch or witch cultist. You didn't force in because you are cautious, right? It's not like you weren't able to look past the barrier. Of course. Merlin exclaimed with a big smile, we need to move carefully, so I thought of reporting what I found first before breaking through the barrier. It will use a lot of mana, but I will manage. Artoria smiled slightly, leaving the two people surprised with their mouths gaped. Reinhard was able to recover faster and looked at Merlin. He never thought that there was another one, a man that could be classified as a monster in terms of skill. In this case, Merlin was the monster of magic, the one who said that he could breach a barrier made by a witch with confidence. Artoria then formed a plan inside her head. However, the plan was a bit risky, so she asked Rom, the one with the most experience in this room. Experience, in this case, was the experience of war in this world. The plan, the strategy, Rom was a veteran. That was what Artoria's instinct told her, and she did trust her instinct. There was also Reinhard, the veteran knight. Rom, I am planning to get the troop a real-life experience by hunting the beast, what do you think? Sir Reinhard is free to say something in his mind too. Reinhard touched his chin with his right hand and looked up slightly, I think there will be no problem. I also don't think it is a problem, young miss. Rather, ask them to hunt a lot of the beast. It will make them feel less fear towards their opponent. Rom said as he nodded his head. Artoria nodded her head, and then she smiled. Well, then the next agenda of the troop will be hunting the beast. The poor soldiers that were now having their breakfast didn't know about it. The day where they could leisurely train themselves would be over in a few days. They would realize that Artoria's training would be a piece of cake compared to the experience that they would get. 2 days passed, Artoria was now in her office while holding her head. This is a problem. She muttered to herself. No one was in the room, she was looking at a piece of paper that was in her hand. Her face that usually stoic and had a little smile now had turned into a frown. The reason was the paper in her hand, it was a letter from a noble in Lugnica. To think they would make a move at this time. I have yet to finish my investigation concerning Natsuki Subaru too. The paper in Artoria's hand was a notice that was sent from the noble in the capital. They noticed that Artoria had been building an army, training a soldier in secret. I never thought that this would happen. Are they serious? Even if I am not noble in this country, I am a king candidate. Isn't it normal to build an army? It made Artoria angry. How could they pull a move like this? They even sent a formal letter to her. The reason why she was angry was not only that. They said that they will take care of the soldiers under them. She slammed the paper on the table and walked out of her office. Reinhard was still in the night barack, so he was not here. However, Merlin was usually on the field, so Artoria made her way to the field. When she went downstairs, however, there was no one there. At that point, she remembered that Merlin brought the troop to hunt beast as a form of training. Sigh, what should I do? She looked at the sky and sighed once again. A formal letter that opposed Artoria building her own army. Usually, such a letter could only be made by the royal or a high-ranked noble. Should I visit Crush Karsten? She knows what to do when the thing goes south like this. However, Artoria shook her head the next second after she asked that to herself. No, she's my rival in this election. What should I do? There was something that she could do, but she wanted to avoid it. The letter only asked Artoria to not nurture an army, soldiers under her. So, if she wanted to, she could just answer that those were mercenaries under her. However, as a knight herself, she wouldn't do that. It would hurt the soldiers' feelings, more importantly, their morale would decrease. They were happy that they had finally become a soldier. Even the majority of the soldiers under Artoria were former mercenaries. So she could at least guess their reaction. She wanted to avoid that at all costs, so she decided. Let's meet Sir Reinhard first. She entered the building again and changed her clothes into her white dress. The Lugnika's knight uniform that she used every day only showed that she was indeed a knight. However, this matter must be resolved by her as a king candidate, so she wore her dress. After changing into her dress, she strapped Avalon in her waist. She then exited the barack and made her way towards the night barack, to Reinhard. The civilians had become more used to seeing Artoria in the street. She'd walked on the street if she had free time, so her relationship with the people in the capital was good. They often gave Artoria fruit and something because of her young appearance. The people saw Artoria as someone kind, as a hero who slew Hakugiai. However, this time no one stopped Artoria because they saw her serious expression. The usually smiling girl had a serious expression as she walked on the street. Silently, Artoria walked past them and she'd arrived in front of the night barack. The guard of the barack had also met Artoria a few times, so he was friendly towards her. But now, seeing her expression, the guard's body went stiff and he saluted. Welcome, Pendragon-sama. See, can I help you with something? Artoria herself noticed her expression. But she didn't even bother to change it because she was actually angry towards the whim of the noble. Yes, can you call Sir Reinhard for me? This is urgent. Why yes. The guard answered instantly and turned around, entering the barack with haste. Artoria was left alone in front of the barack, waiting for Reinhard. At that moment, a man with light purple hair walked from the distance. She noticed the man, and she looked at him while nodding her head a little. The man bowed his head in the distance and then approached Artoria. The man with light purple hair was Julius Jaculius. He stopped in front of Artoria and then bowed his head to greet her. It's nice to meet you in this place, Pendragon-sama. It's nice to meet you too, Sir Julius. Do you need something from me? Artoria tried to smile as best as she could. She tried to look nice all the time, especially in front of her rival's knight. However, Julius was a spirit knight. He was sensitive to emotion. Actually, no, Pendragon-sama. I am just walking when I saw you, so I am thinking of at least stopping to greet you when I am passing here. While I am at it, may I ask why are you visiting Night Barack, Artoria-sama? Of course, he wouldn't say his true intention. Artoria was a king candidate, and he served another king candidate. She was an enemy, but he was also a knight. If by chance Artoria won the election, he would eventually need to protect her as her knight too. Julius also held respect towards Artoria. Her code of chivalry that she held high was magnificent. So he was confused, why was such a person got angry in the middle of the day and visited the night barack? It's nothing. I just have something to do with Sir Reinhard, hence I visited Night Barack to see him. By the way, I heard Anastasia-sama was leaving the capital, are you not tagging along with her? This time Artoria asked Julius. Anastasia had left capital and went somewhere else to do business yesterday. She was a merchant, so she moved a lot. No, she was escorted by Ricardo already, and I was tasked to stay in the capital because of my knight position. Ah, Ricardo. I know that man. He's strong, I also got amazed by his bravery for attacking Hakugiai without any fear. Send my regard to him when you meet him, I wanted to fight alongside him on another battlefield. Artoria praised Ricardo, a mercenary that fought with her in the Hakugiai expedition. He was a wolf beast man that used a big sword. He was strong and brave, so Artoria remembered him. I will tell him exactly like that, your words will make him happy, Pendragon-sama. They talked with each other for a while, until finally, the guard came back with Reinhard beside him. The guard stood back in her post while Reinhard walked to Artoria. Milady, do you need something from me? Reinhard asked Artoria. He then noticed Julius and gave him a small nod. Julius was keen, so he knew that it was time for him to leave. He bowed his head to Artoria. Well then, Pendragon-sama. I have duty after this, please excuse me. Very well. That's a nice conversation, Sir Julius. It's my honor. Answered Julius and then he walked away. Artoria looked at Reinhard. It seems that we have a problem. Said Artoria with a serious tone. If you like this content, don't forget to like and subscribe. See you later, bye bye.